Hello and welcome. I see the room is filling up with attendees already. I'll allow a few minutes for the room to fill up. Welcome everybody to our creation and innovation webinar. It's really great to have you all here today. Gosh, we're filling up quick. It's nice to see everybody. Whilst everyone sort of starts to file in, I'll start with some really quick intros on what to expect from today's panel, who I am and who all of these wonderful people in this room are, and some of the things that you can expect for today's talk. So we are actually here at Leeds Digital Fest, which I think this is its 6th year. It's the second largest UK tech fest in the UK. And I think last year it had 45,000 attendees in total. And I think that accumulated to about 400 webinars. So we are delighted as Tileyard to be part of it this year. So thank you all for joining us today. So a little bit about me. My name's Lucy and I am the head of marketing for Tileyard London and Tileyard North. So we'll go into a bit more detail about what those things are very shortly. And I'll sort of be comparing today alongside my lovely co-founder, Mr. Nick Keynes. So we've brought together a room of incredible people who are sort of leading music and tech sort of within their field. And I'm so excited and I feel like I'm going to learn as much as people in the room are going to learn today. So we're really excited for it. We'll have a quick chat and then we have a Q&A box. So feel free to, as we're talking, to pop your questions in and we'll sort of try and get to them at the very end. So we'll sort of talk for an hour and then we'll get through as many Q&As as we can. So it's lovely to have you all here. And I'll hand over to the amazing Nick Keynes, who can tell us a little bit more about what he does at Tileyard and a bit more about Tileyard North as well.
Thanks, Lucy. God, what do I do at Tileyard? I change light bulbs.
Oh yeah.
I let people around the campus. No, thanks for that intro. No, it's great to be here. Thanks for having us. And yeah, I mean, I guess my title is co-founder. So it was going back 10 years now. It's hard to believe. Myself and Paul Kemp, who owns Tileyard London, sort of put our heads together and thought, wouldn't it be amazing to try and create a creative community? It's my background. I've been in and around the music industry for 25 plus years now, which is quite terrifying. So we started out by building 10 music studios with the view that let's try and get 10 like-minded people all together in one place so they can, every day and see if any magic happens. And 10 years later, we're up to 140 plus studios on our site in London. We've got nearly 200 creative companies, some of whom are joining us on this panel, some of our clients here that are really who are what make Tileyard what it is. It's really not about us, it's about the people that make up our community. And that word community is one that I'm sure will be used quite a lot today. So my role really is has been to sort of curate the community that we now have, to connect people, which is something that I do on a daily basis, multiple times every day. And also to sort of continue to try and enhance what we've got, to try and increase the opportunities that we can present to the members of our community by making the right connections, and also to keep growing the community, and Tileyard North being the next really important step for us. So we've got a fantastic site in Wakefield that we're sort of in the midst of regenerating. It's a wonderful old textiles mill site that has been sitting dormant and a little unloved for the last 35 years. And as of sort of end of Q1 next year, so springtime next year, hopefully there's going to be an abundance of creative talent all heading there every day doing wonderful stuff. Hazel will be able to tell us a little bit more about that later, because Hazel's going to be there with us, which is very exciting. So that's a little bit about me, and but very much it's about the others that are here today, because hopefully when you hear their stories, you'll realise what Tileyard's all about. It's about facilitating and harnessing talent like the guys that are with us today.
Thank you so much, Nick. I couldn't have said it better myself. So that kind of contextualizes why, as sort of Tileyard, we're sort of contributing towards Leeds Digital Fest this year and hopefully many, many more. So I'd sort of like to sort of open up the webinar by going around the room and hearing a little bit more about all of these amazing game changers and what it is they do and sort of how they are leading the music tech field. So I'd like to start with you, Mr. Will Evans, who is the CEO of British tech company Spitfire. If you can tell us a little bit about, who Spitfire Audio are and what your role is within that company.
Sure. Yeah, it's great to be here, everyone. So let me tell you a bit about Spitfire Audio first. The simple way that we try and explain what we do is that we make sounds for film composers. There you go, slipped up already. Obviously too simple. So for the last over 10 years now, we've been producing sounds that get used by pretty much all of the key film composers, media composers, and games composers to put together their works in some way, shape, or form for the scores that they create. So we go and record instruments and all different manner of sounds, and we say we get it one note at a time, and we take those recordings, put those into software, and these composers use those so that they can take a piano, say that we've recorded somewhere, and they can write with that on their laptop if they're on a transatlantic flight or on a bus. And sometimes they'll create scores entirely with our sounds. Sometimes they'll combine it with real orchestras, or sometimes it will be the draft that then goes on to be re-recorded properly with an orchestra in real life. So that's a kind of quick version of what we do. And it's worth saying that over the last 5 years or so, we've kind of relatively exploded from a customer point of view. We've taken those products out to the more general music making community. And so we've now got over 1 million users who are using our sounds. And that spans now not just from big film scores and TV scores and things like that, but through big pop productions and small pop productions. So you hear our stuff through lots of stuff, lots of output all over the world. So that's a bit about Spitfire, and I hope that made sense. And then in terms of me, I'm the CEO there. So I joined about 5 years ago and had a background in the academic side of music and music technology. So I specialized in acoustics for a long time. And as I was doing all my research and things like that, I also ran a record label at the same time. And that record label led to a partnership, a joint venture actually with Believe, who are also now part of Tileyard, which is great. And I kind of ended up doing this hybrid thing of working in the academic side of sound and lecturing and things like that, but then also having this record label and signing artists and managing artists. And they kind of converged in the what we call the music tech world, where I ended up doing artist relations and working with the Focusrite brand, who is also now at Tileyard. So yeah, there's a theme there. You see, it's like the magnet of all these fantastic companies. So I worked there and actually was really the go-between between the music industry and the technology that they were making, which was interfaces, keyboards, that type of thing. And so I did a big stint there, and then shortly joined Spitfire to head up there. It was called Global Marketing and Sales, I think. And shortly thereafter, I was invited to become the chief exec, and I've been doing that for 3 or 4 years now. And yeah, it's an absolutely wild ride. And we've grown from this. I always had this strong memory of it. Tileyard in particular, when I first joined, it was a relatively empty office with about 5 full-time employees. And we've now got about 100 full-time employees plus contractors and other freelancers too. So it's been a mad journey. So yeah, that's me and us.
Thank you. Well, that's really exciting. And I think one thing that always strikes me about Spitfire Audio, and someone's put a comment here in that they reach over 100 million people with your audio products, is the kind of the high quality and the scalability of what it is that you guys do. If you hear the word Spitfire Audio, it's a real household name in the industry now. I don't know a single composer, producer, engineer that doesn't use your products. So I think that's just, you guys have really set the bar really high, and what you do is so truly unique in terms of quality. So actually from that, I'll take that down to Prash, who is our sort of engineer and mixer master in the room extraordinaire, who is, I think, double Grammy nominated, if I'm right, and double Simon Diamond certified.
And double Mercury nominated as of last week, but we didn't win. So I'm a double loser.
Oh, congratulations on the nomination. That's incredible.
It's It's a fantastic record. That was with the first one with Georgia Smith for her debut Lost and Found album, which I mixed and mastered. And the second was for Berwyn's debut Vegas mixtape, which is the first ever mixtape nominated for a Mercury, which is a phenomenal record. So I highly recommend people go and check that. He's a very special talent.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so I guess I'm the nerd of the group, other than Will. He's more on the acoustic nerdery. I'm more on the let's run things through equipment and see how we can distort them kind of side of things. And so I'm my trade, I guess, is a mix, mastering, engineer, and producer. My first Grammy nomination was for my own album, which we mixed and mastered into Auro 3D 9.1 surround, which is called Symbol, which is a big collaborative album. So that was my band, which we toured with for a long time. I'm far too scared of the outdoors now, so I'm mainly just based in the studio. Very happily here at Tileyard, thanks to Nick and my other long-term collaborator, who's Liam Howlett. So I'm in-house with The Prodigy, and I do a lot of their music and master their No Tourists record and their live records, and lots of other exciting things for them in the future. But I guess I'm known as originally as Georgia Smith's in-house label engineer. So I mix and mastered all of her records from the beginning of Blue Lights all the way to kind of now. As well as recently I had my first major Latin project for an artist called Caliuchis. And that album is now top of the Billboard Latin #1. And Telepatia reached #2 in the global Spotify charts. And I think it's done pretty well, actually, that one. I was quite surprised. But I definitely enjoyed the Latin stuff. And then I guess across the board, I work with artists from SZA to Stormzy, Kid Cudi, J Balvin, Skepta, Khalees, Aloe Black, Party Next Door. I mean, I like even then Shikari. I mean, I just love working on loads of different genres. It's how I grew up in the 90s, and how, I just like, I remember the old Reading Festival lineup when it was literally The Offspring, Prodigy, Rage Against the Machine, Underworld, and it'd just all be on one lineup. That's kind of how I always wanted my discography to be, and that's how I follow it. You know, I just kind of just whatever makes me move. And recently, I think we've installed Dolby Atmos. I think we're the first active room at Tileyard with a full Dolby Atmos delivery system where we're handing in mixes. So I work on stereo mixes, masters, and now I also offer the Atmos mix as well.
I have to say, Prash, I'm loving the look of it in your background. I've been meaning to pop up and see it, and I can't believe the first time I've seen it is on Zoom. But it looks
I know, it's shocking, isn't it? I was laughing about that. I had to convince Nick to let me drill into the ceiling a few weeks ago. But he's done a fantastic job, actually. It really sounds amazing in here.
Oh wow, we'll have to come up for a little listening session and have a hear of it. I think it'd be great to go more into the Dolby Atmos stuff and sort of your involvement in that a little bit later into the webinar. But I mean, that was a really understated version of your discog, because I've read all of it and it was really extensive. So it's really
thank you.
And thank you, Prash. I'd like to now head over to the amazing Hazel Savage, who is the CEO and co-founder of Musio, who are another music tech company. And I've read plenty of times what your software and your AI does, but I'd absolutely love to hear like your top liner of like how you describe it to people, because it is a really interesting piece of software. So if you could explain that for us.
Thank you so much. And I will get onto that, but I wanted to refer to that lineup, that Leeds Reading lineup that Prash referred to. I was at that weekend. Absolutely fantastic. Rage Against the Machine, Prodigy. I'm going to call that. Yeah, I'm going to call that the good old days. I'm missing that kind of live music going on. But yeah, hi to everyone, and for anyone who doesn't know know me, my name is Hazel Savage, and I am the CEO and co-intelligence company for the music industry. But what I really mean by that is we're using artificial intelligence to fast track a lot of the tedious processes that nobody in the music industry wants to do. So we want to free up musicians, labels, artists, streaming services. We want to free them up to be able to do the creative sides of their job while we do a lot of the process. So for example, you know, one of our clients, I'll just pick them out the air, Epidemic Sound, use our AI-based tags. And what they do is, you know, they've got a catalogue of 30,000 plus tracks. They have one genre per track, but they realized that meant that a lot of their tracks weren't showing up. You know, if someone searches trap, but they haven't tagged any songs as trap, they've tagged everything as hip hop, then no one's going to be able to find that audio. So we're able to add a lot of other metadata to audio, and we use AI to do that. So rather than somebody sit there and go through 30,000 tracks and manually tap out the BPM, we can assign it automatically. So we trained an AI to be able to do these various sort of repetitive tasks that exist on the metadata side of the industry. It would have me at this point. My first job while I was at uni, I used to work at HMV on a Saturday and Sunday, and then I went full time. But my first kind of real job was I worked for Shazam when it was still a startup. So back probably close to like 15 years ago now. And I've also worked for Pandora, Universal Music, and a bunch of other music tech companies. So yeah, absolutely pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Hazel. I'd love to hear a little bit more about sort of the next phase of Musio as well. And that sort of explains it a lot more. I mean, I do fundamentally understand what it is. I just find it such an interesting piece of AI. And also I just think it's going to be a complete game changer for the way sort of labels filter out music for playlisting and all sorts of other resources. So it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then that sort of takes us over. So we've gone through sort of music creation through to sort of music, I guess, tagging, and now over to sort of Ryan, who is the CEO and co-founder of a company called Audoo, who make these audio meters, which is basically changing the way, I guess, that artists get paid their performance rights. So really fascinating, and I've seen loads of stuff going out for you guys recently in all the music press, so congratulations. It's all looking like really exciting for you over the next year. But if you can tell us a bit more about, you know, what Audoo is, what your vision is, and sort of like, yeah, how you founded the company, what it is that you do within it.
Of course, but before I start, I've just realized that there's now Dolby Atmos office upgrades available at Tileyard. So I know Nick is above me. I think he's a floor or two floors above me. So is that being installed in here later as well, Nick? Or, you know, how do we get that?
We'll have to have a chat about that, Ryan.
Just bring some down. It's fine. Just bring it down. Yeah, cool. So thank you. And so as you said, I created Audoo nearly 3 years ago now as a business, and we were really focused on the royalty distribution end of the industry. And I think if you look at historic royalty distribution, there are three key categories. So the first one is what's known as broadcast, so TV and radio. The second one now is kind of the more digital side, so the DSP, the Spotify's, which we all know there's been a very, very large inquiry into about how those distributions work or don't work as such. And actually where we're focused is what I like to think is the untapped part is public performance. So this is where you hear music in any, I don't know, retail environments, of when Hazel worked in HMV, to a gym, to a restaurant that you ate in last night, to a train, to an aeroplane, anywhere that you would hear music in a public area. And it's funny because you look at the inquiry that's just happened, you know, in the UK government, and it's like, that's worth like 20% of the distribution part, but public performance is worth like 40% of the distribution part. You're like, you're having a big inquiry into the wrong bit, guys. So as you said, we've created an audio meter, which I'm actually in Blue Peter style. I have one here. So, and this goes into those public venues. Groundbreaking technology, everything that we built from the ground up here in-house in the UK. And we detect the music. We are GDPR compliant, so if there's any private conversations going on, for some reason you're sat in a cafe discussing your bank details. I mean, I wouldn't recommend that, but we would anyway. We strip out all of that and we get down to the actual performance and the recording and what it was. And we're working with the performing right organizations around the world. So I can't actually say where we're live right now, which is really frustrating, but we're live in the Southern Hemisphere and a couple of places in Europe as well. But there is lots of things coming really, really soon. So yeah, we're really excited, because actually what it means is, for the first time ever, you've gone from this, this kind of statistical analysis of, well, this is what was played on the big radio station, so this is what we guess is being played on Oxford Street, to actually what was really played on Oxford Street, or even in an R&B bar in Leicester, or a goth bar in Manchester, whatever that genre of music and those exact performances were. All of a sudden, we're going to be able to know and report it back to the relevant PRO.
Amazing, which isn't really something that I suppose you think too much about until you are an artist who's putting music out into the world. And your story is really interesting as well, because I've interviewed you before, and you can tell us a bit more about why you decided to make this product.
You're right. So yeah, and I think it goes back to Hazel's point. The artists politely aren't the most commercial of people, because their nature is being an artist, right? They don't have to be. And as you say, so this is the embarrassing bit. But I was in a band in my teens, and over the years, I've just heard my music played so many times, from football stadiums to restaurants. And a few years ago, I said Oxford Street earlier. I was in a department store on Oxford Street with my wife. I think it's Saturday afternoon, doing some shopping, and my song came on, and she turned to me and said, "Well, how much are you being played?" I was joking. I think she was looking at a very expensive handbag that day. And I was like, it's certainly not going to cover that. It's like half a penny, like forget it. And I think a couple of months later, she said, "Oh, did you ever look how much you got paid?" And I said, "No, I didn't, because I told you it was like half a penny, right? At most." And then it happened a couple of weeks later, my royalty statement came through, and I read it, and I was like, first of all, I didn't understand it. I was like, look at this does not make sense at all. And second of all, how can I drill down to those individual performances? And I couldn't. And actually, the more and more I read and the more research that I did, particularly from my background, I've come from a fintech background. I used to head up data for Visa Europe, and did some app stuff on really big scale. And actually what I found, the more and more I read, was the worse, the further down the rabbit hole I got, the more musicians were confused, or managers, or even publishers. And I was like, oh my God, we can solve this. I'm pretty good at building technology, and hopefully some people will back it and raise some money, which is where people like Nick and Paul and the amazing Tileyard team came in. And here we are 3 years later, 50 odd people, live in a few places around the world. I nearly said where then. Luckily I didn't. I get soon. And yeah, here we are. So yeah, really, really happy.
I'm looking forward to getting that out of you by the end of the.
I can see in the attendees 2 of our marketing team are on, so I'm going to be in big trouble if they catch me.
I love the depth of secrecy around it as well. It's sort of like makes it really exciting. I really want to know more now. So just interestingly, can I get a show of hands of anyone in the room that has once also been in a band?
Nick definitely has.
Is that all of you? I think it is. All right. So that kind of brings me back to probably what got you into your positions and why you feel so passionate about music. I often find a lot of the people that I have met through my time in the industry have started out as music creators as well. But I'd just like to bring it back to sort of like why we're in this room and why we're having this conversation, or why we're talking amongst ourselves, is actually just that very short overview just then of what all of you do. It's really sort of brings back to just the fact that you guys are serious game changers in what you're doing. In some level, you are influencing the industry in quite a monumentous way. So I just want to sort of echo that and just say, wow, there's just some real powerhouses in this room, and some incredible products, and some amazing sort of perspectives and backgrounds, and just some great innovations, which is what we're all about. And I know that Nick and Paul always champion that at Tileyard, which is probably what makes it such a sort of exciting place to be in. So I'd like to sort of take it back to the room then, and sort of go a little bit more in depth really as to sort of what brought you all into sort of working sort of for music. So I'd like to start again with you, Will. What was the thing that sort of drew you into the music industry initially, which sort of drives you to where you think you are right now?
I, really, for me, my earliest memories of, I guess, wanting to be something was related to music, and so I've got this boring tale that I tell people. When I was probably about 3 or 4, I had this videotape that I used to watch on repeat, which was a documentary about Michael Jackson and kind of his stardom from a child to I guess the bad era, something like that. Anyway,
me too, man. Had the same.
Do you remember that one?
Yeah, I did.
Okay,
that's so weird.
Okay, so I used to watch that. So my dad, I think it was my brothers or something, and I used to like it. My dad used to, when I used to wake up early, put it in the video machine and play it in the morning. So I watched it every day, and I remember there were shots of Berry Gordy, who was a founder and ran Motown Records, and I just had this long-lasting image of a kind of studio backdrop, gold records, and this idea of kind of, I guess, community and putting these records out. And this is from like a really, really young age. So I think it was always there, that excitement about being part of something like that. I was obsessed with Michael Jackson when I was a kid. And I just took the world's longest and most convoluted path to arrive at having a job in the music industry, because I was probably, like most of the people on this call, and I mean the guests as well, listening, I was part of a very conventional upbringing that very much said that working in music isn't a viable future. So I kind of went down, math, sciences, engineering, and constantly pushing my way back towards the place that I wanted to be. And so that's what's exciting, I think, from my standpoint now, is the fact that, like you say, Lucy, all these people here involved in companies and groups and supporting huge amounts of prosperity for our industry, and all this opportunity for people to come and work in the music industry. And it's amazing today still how many people I talk to go, oh, my dad says I can't ever get a job in the music industry because there aren't any. And I think this is a really kind of shameful fallacy that particularly in the UK we seem to propagate, where actually if you look on record, the contribution to the country's GDP as a result of kind of creative industries, and particularly the music industry, is pretty extreme. So it's kind of like, yeah, you've got a good chance of working in music. Maybe the thing that people get wrong is obviously being an artist, and a hugely successful artist. I think that is perhaps where people join those two things, and they hear, oh, I'd like to work in the music industry, and they read that as, I want to be Adele. And they go, you can't, that's not going to happen. So can you get a job at Boots and carry on? But anyway, sorry, a bit of a detour, but that's the gist of it. Always obsessed, basically.
Yeah, always obsessed. I think we can probably all relate to that. And actually, just to add on to what you just said, I think there's an average statistic that for every single maid that goes out into the world, I think there's 60 people behind it. So those are 60 pieces of job creation. That's not the artist itself. So just always something to bear in mind. What about you, Prash? How is your was you just an incredible music lover, and that drew you into sort of music creation?
Yeah, I think so. I played classical piano from around age 6, and then flute and guitar and drums and a few other things. And I definitely had the same video. And I actually went to the Dangerous tour. I don't know if you were there, Will, but I might have seen you around. I was around 8 years old, I think. And then, I was well and truly on a kind of more classical path until my older brother, Mitesh, became an avid record collector of electronic music, which just absolutely blew my mind. Hearing early Prodigy records, hearing all the early rave records, jungle records, the mix between jungle, techno, house, all coming together. And that just absolutely detoured my life, to be honest. So I stopped being more classical orientated and started just finding ways to sequence music, first of all on an Amiga 500 and then on hardware sequencers. And by age 14, I started playing in clubs, doing live drum and bass PAs. And yeah, did that until through my GCSEs and into my A levels. But then we couldn't find anywhere to play in Reading where I grew up because all the clubs were kind of shut down. So I started with some other friends, a night called Bassheads, and we sold out 2,500 tickets in our first event. And that went on to age 21, 3.5 years. Every month we were putting on these huge raves. I was playing and we could do our performances there. And then touring up and down the M4 corridor and up to Cardiff and Bristol a lot and all over the place. And then I kind of weirdly, I've always done a bit of promotion on the side of what I do. So I started my studio at 21 in Reading and, started producing R&B and hip hop and various other genres for people. Traveled to Jamaica and produced some music out there, Bermuda, America, all over the place. And then, I kind of spent just before between starting my band, Engine-Earz, which is where my name came from. We did a couple of Made of Veil sessions with that and toured with DJ Shadow and Shikari, Dread Zone, The Streets. So we were doing a lot of touring. I kind of stumbled into India, which is obviously my homeland, and we did a festival there and realized there was a bit of an opening for, someone to become a trusted ear between India and the artists over here who wanted to tour in India. But the infrastructure wasn't there. So I spent kind of 5 years helping artists tour India, which is great fun. So Skrillex's first tour, the Major Lasers tours out there, Mala, and about 80 other electronic artists we took out there and did tours. But yeah, and that kind of, when I got back to London, we were waiting for our album to come out and just heard the Blue Lights demo and really wanted to get involved and help, sound be as good as it could for the artists and empower the artist's vision and help them sound good on rigs and sound systems.
That makes sense, as you sort of had such a kind of such a strong background in sort of live, and that marrying sort of like the sort of music into India sounds like it was a really pivotal and important thing to have done, sort of bring some of the Western tours into India. And I knew that you'd done that, but I didn't realize you'd taken quite so many high profile bands. That's really exciting. And yeah, again, another big thing that you can mark off as sort of that you've done in your career, which has been really influential. How about you, Hazel? I know a little bit about the fact that perhaps you was once also in a music act, and we spoke a bit about that before.
I was, and I just did a comedy double take. Apologies for anyone that saw it, but there was a cat right there, and now there isn't a cat there, and so there's a cat somewhere in the room that I'm in. So if I seem startled, don't worry, it's just your classic work from home panel situation. But yeah, 100% a failed musician. I got my first guitar when I was 13. I've been playing guitar now for like over 20 years. That makes it sound like I should be good. I'm not very good. I kind of plateaued very early. I would say between the ages about 13 and 15, I was learning guitar, and I've been about that same standard ever since. But it was good enough. I played well enough to be in, I used to be in an all-girl punk band when I lived in London. And we used to play, I don't know how we did it. We used to play like 4 or 5 shows a week, and I had a full-time job. I don't know where that energy came from. Wow. That's no longer existent. So yeah, I've been playing music, and I still play. I still have a ton of guitars, but now I do that cool thing where I play in a band with my husband, which is obviously very rock and roll. That's what the real punks are doing these days. But I just I love it. I love to play guitar. I love to sing. I love to write music. But it became very apparent quite early on that I was much better at the business side of things. I started managing artists. I got a job at Shazam very early on, and had a lot of success with, building out the Shazam Live Lounge and putting artists on in a room that they had originally designated for traveling executive suitcases. I was like, can I turn it into a studio? And they said, yes. And so, I've always been better at seeing gaps and filling them with creativity and opportunities for artists. So, but yeah, I did also come from a music background, but I've been working for about 15 years now. So it's been a while. It's been a while since I've
where can I find this punk rock band, Hazel?
Well, if anyone wants to see a video of me playing at a venue in London called South of the Border, where someone buys me a shot of gin, but I drop it, and so then I snort it off the floor, which was just the kind of punk rock and roll things that you did back when you were playing shows. Private message me for the link to that video. That's I'd be happy to share that, no problem.
I'm quite upset that I haven't seen this video yet, but I'm definitely going to be slipping into your DMs later for that.
I know, it's unbelievable, isn't it? We met once in person, and you can't believe that's not the first thing I come out with. Like, oh, do you want to have a look at this video?
We spent a long time together that day, Hazel.
and it never came up. I apologise. That's on me.
So actually, just sort of like, again, going back to like the wider context, sort of hearing all of your stories, I think is incredible. But it's interesting how you all started as creators, but now you're in this sort of space. A few questions around this, and I'm going to sort of take this out really into the room, because what really strikes me is just how everything that you guys are doing sort of complements each other. And I'll sort of bring it back again to sort of like Spitfire Audoo, creating these incredible sort of tastemaker packs of sort of audio, which is being used across, music creation globally, which obviously Prash has a sort of piece in, and he sort of helps artists to bring their sort of, I guess, tracks up to the perfect sound. And then over to the label, where then they deal with Hazel and sort of getting everything tagged and getting them to the appropriate playlist so people hear them. And then over to Ryan's team, who then basically help those artists be paid sort of the best and most finesse amount of sort of royalties for the music that's sort of going out there. So it's just this really complementary journey that just keeps coming back to me, which I think is really, really exciting. And that's one of the reasons I put everyone in this panel, because I just thought, wow, what a story to tell. But as you all started in music creation and you are all sort of where you are now, I imagine there's a lot of people in this room, and we'll sort of take it to the questions sort of in the next sort of 15 minutes, as to, I'm sure people have plenty of things to ask you. But essentially, what sort of took you from being a music creator to sort of coming up with the ideas that you have? You sort of saw the gap, you knew what needed to happen. How did you get to where you are? How do you elevate it to the space that you're in and sort of bring your product to the industry and bring it to the masses in the way that you have all done that? I'd like to think that probably Nick Keynes, who sort of works quite closely in the background at Tileyard, obviously, I know you're quite an ideas man, Nick, so you're quite good at identifying the product and sort of helping to aid them on that journey. And I don't want to take that sort of away as well from the sort of conversation, because I think what you do and what people like you do is also really, really integral. So I'd like to take that to the room, really. So anyone who feels like they'd like to answer, how do you take this idea? You found it, it's a gap, you've got a new piece of tech, you know that it's going to change the industry. What happens next? Where do you go next with that? Who wants to sort of answer that one first?
Well, Lucy, I can just add one thing. I mean, it's interesting listening to everyone chat, particularly at the beginning. You say I have lots of good ideas. I think really for me, most of the stories I tell are other people's, and I think just listening to the guys speak at the beginning, it just shows you the sort of depth of talent and sort of drive and ambition that we have at Tileyard. I think for me, I'm not a technology expert at all. I'm so green with tech. But I think what I have seen is what technology has enabled. And the bit that I like to jump on is that it's looking at the trends and then finding people that are exploiting those opportunities and trying to facilitate those. So, I mean, I think Tileyard, going back 10 years ago, Tileyard would not have been able to exist much earlier than that, because I think it was the emerging technology that allowed content to be created so much more simply and made everything so much more accessible. That was really our trigger point to Tileyard. I think previous to that, if you wanted to make a record, you had to go into a studio. I mean, I say 10 years, it's probably a bit longer than that, but it was really starting to get to the point where you could make a credible record pretty much anywhere. So that was one thing. I think we're seeing it now in terms of filmed content, where there's such an appetite for content, and people are just creating. The talent, the creative talent, is so much better placed to be able to create that content, and technology plays such a key role. So for me, really, it's listening to other people's stories and see, trying to find the opportunity. And if it's convincing, it's then a case of, right, I want to bring you guys in, come and do what you do here. And that's always been my mantra, really. So that's all I really wanted to add. And now over to the guys that really do know technology and understand it and can probably be much more eloquent about it.
Nick, before we hand back over to everybody else with that question, how do you know when you speak to someone, that what you're dealing with is something that's really exciting? You know this is going to change the industry in some way, and you know that you want Tileyard to be some sort of part of it. How do you know? God, that's such a good question. I think it's all about the people. I mean, again, just listening to Ryan's story, to everyone's story today, I think it's authenticity is so crucial to me. A lot of people talk a good game, but actually it's really, is there substance to the journey that people are on, or to the idea that they may have, and then also the ability to activate and actually to deliver upon those ideas. I think the idea is often very much the tip of the iceberg. It's more about actually, how do you drive that idea forward? We'll testify to this, that Spitfire is such a, I mean, the guy, Christian and Paul, the founders of Spitfire, it's their sort of energy and expertise and just their talent that underpins that business. And then it's the way that those products are then taken to market wholeheartedly. I think there's a gamut of stuff, but I think really for me it's about that authenticity and believability. Just the same with an artist. You could have 5 people all performing on stage, but the ones that really stand out, the really great artists to me, are the ones that you believe in. They may not be quite as good as maybe the one that performs before or after, but if it's that believability, I think is for me the crucial thing. So it's very much a sort of a subjective kind of judgment call on whether someone is worth believing in and supporting. That's a brilliant answer. Thank you, Nick. I think definitely authenticity is one, but then I think passion is the other, isn't it? So it's those two things together. Does anyone else in the room have a comment on that?
Go on. I thought, and you kind of started with almost how did you get started and what you do, and actually the story that I always tell with Audoo is I did the research, I validated everything, and I believed it was a problem that I'd spotted, right? And I didn't know how I was going to solve it. I'd got an idea of how I was going to solve it. And of course I needed to go and find some amazing people, which are the team that we employ now to help develop it and put it together. Because my coding compared to our team, they don't let me code anymore, which is a shame. But I always say that I went to 10 people initially, so 10, you call it the family and friends funding round, and actually it was ex-bosses, it was I went to a couple of family members and I went to some other friends, and I was like, hey, I've got this idea. And at the time I was raising £150,000 to get it off the ground. And the people that I went to, there were a few things. The first thing was I had SEIS, Advanced Assurance. So for anybody who doesn't know that, it's a brilliant government scheme for anybody investing into startups like Audoo or I'm sure the other guys, where actually they can offset it against some of their tax returns. So it's actually a really efficient way to invest. And if something went wrong with the business or it didn't make it, then actually they can offset the loss as well. So they're kind of in for nothing outside of their cash flow impact. And the 10 people that I went to, 7 people said yes. Three of them said no. So one of them was an old boss. He actually belittled me. It wasn't a particularly nice experience. And I was like, I worked for you for 3 years, and you said that I was unbelievably backable and hardworking, and you didn't back me on this. But the 7 that did, some did a little more, some did a little less, but it kind of worked out. And actually, we closed the funding round last year. And we returned some money to those individual investors. So the average investment on that round was about £10,000 from these 7 people. Each of those people are now millionaires for backing me, genuinely. Which is great, which is a great exit story. But the big thing was I convinced them to back me and to back the idea. And actually, before they put the money in, I said to each and every one of them, can you go away And can you research this? You know, and none of them were for music, right? One of the guys I play tennis with, and he's a lawyer. He's actually an employment lawyer. And you know, and I told him, and he went, mate, he said, you're mad. He said, this is billions of dollars and pounds around the world. He said, there's no way that people are being paid royalties off some bloke stood with a clipboard in Selfridges. He said, he said, you're wrong. He said, I don't believe you. And he phoned me 3 days later and he was like, okay, you're right. He said, you know, he said, I'll still beat you at tennis. He said, but you're right. So, and that was it. And I think being able to show them the tangible research, the opportunity, and then actually the next big challenge, of course, is putting your team together, and it takes a lot of time and effort to do that. And what I'd say is it's hard work. It is the hardest work you will ever do, you know, creating and founding your own business where you have to raise investment, whether it's chasing investment down, whether it's becoming a jack of all trades. You know, that first year I was payroll, sales, HR, marketing, you name it. I was doing it to keep the cost of the business down and just to make it stand. But once I got that first prototype with that first 150 quid that I raised, next thing I did was I went to the chairperson of PRS here in the UK, and I messaged him on LinkedIn and I said, hey, could I get 15 minutes of your time? I'd like to ask you some questions and show you something. And he came back and said, well, what do you want to talk to me about? And I said, just please give me 15 minutes. And I was ultra mysterious about it all. And I did. I got the 15 minutes, which turned into 2 hours. And he was like, look, you know, that demo that you've just given me, oh my God, if you can scale this and you can deliver this, he said, the world will want it. Absolutely. So of course I came back out. I phoned the 7 friends and said, oh my God, you're not going to believe how this meeting went. And actually that was then when we went, okay, now we go again, now we raise again, which is where I found amazing people like Nick and Paul, who, you know, I could go to them and say, look, here's the emails. Here's them telling me, this is like the chairperson saying, dude, if you can do this, you know, we'll buy it. Everybody will buy it. You're in. And then you're in a spiral and it goes from there. And that's it. So, yeah.
Wow, what a story. So a lot of hard work, many hats, and really believing in yourself. But at the very beginning, just finding what you believe was the kind of the gap, and then just backing it up with data. And
Google's a friend, right? The amount of people that would say to me, well, how did you work out how to do payroll? I said, I'd sit there at 11 p.m. on a night and figure it out. You know, that's what Google's about, right? There's no answer you can't find these days. So, yeah.
I've got to agree with you. I think it's very, very possible to be anything through YouTube now, certainly on a micro scale.
Yeah.
What about you, Hazel? Was it a sort of similar story for Musio?
Yes and no. I think, you know, because I was always, you know, I was a marketer before I started Musio, and really what I used to do, I remember, I've got a really vivid memory of when I was working at Universal Music in Australia, and we were supposed to put an announcement live about Lady Gaga's maybe tour or album or something at the time, and I didn't have an image asset, and I asked our promo team, I asked our PR team, everyone fobbed me off or said, oh, you know, you need to speak to this person, you need to speak to that person. And that went on for like half a day. And in the end, I just went to billboard.com, screenshot the image of the official image of Lady Gaga and uploaded it to this is how we manage assets and this is the workflow. So really, when it came to starting a business, I just had to sit down and think, like, what are the 10 biggest problems that I consistently come across in my career? And I just wrote them down. I made a big old list. I think number 4 on the list, but I haven't got a solution to that one because I was working with my co-founder who's an AI developer, and apparently there's no AI solution if someone's just a bit of an asshole. So that's an ongoing, that's a problem. If anyone else wants to pick that up and run with it. But some of them, you know, it was my problem statement came from the idea that, you know, when I worked in HMV, there was, you know, all new music come out on a Monday morning. And I used to put those CDs on the shelf, and on a busy week, there'd be 5 or 6, quiet week, 3 or 4. But now, with the rise of bedroom studios and music production apps, there are 60,000 new songs released every day. So there's now more music that comes out in a day than used to come out in a whole year. So I was like, okay, that's an issue, because now we don't know what we've got. Now we don't know how much, what's good, what isn't. So I really started with that problem statement, and then working with my technical co-founder said, of all the technologies that where do you think we could be of assistance? Like, I know where the gaps are, where can we help? And we thought, based on, we did research on Google, because sometimes you come up with a great idea and you go, that's brilliant. And then you Google it and there's like 5 other people doing it, and they've been doing it for a while and they've got lots of money. So it's like, yeah, maybe we won't do that one. But we managed to find an area that wasn't super crowded, that not a lot of people had managed to do successfully. So yeah, that was our approach. Look for those gaps, but you have to be a little bit deliberate. I thought I would just one day, just suddenly, like a bolt of lightning, I would suddenly be like, I have an idea for a company. And it turns out it doesn't work like that. You have to be a little bit more deliberate. But that's good, because that means anyone can do it.
I love that. So be deliberate, clear about your intentions, but always Google it first.
Totally. Oh, someone was pitching me their business the other day, and it was basically Boomy. And I was like, oh, that's awkward. I was like, yeah, I should Google it before you pitch it to someone. There's a lot of other people doing this. But yeah, so that would be my number 1 tip.
I just want to go back to Hazel with research. Research is everything. When she says about pitching somebody, so our head of finance is now my wife. She is an accountant. She's a very detailed background in accountancy. And the other day, a recruiter messaged her on LinkedIn trying to poach her for a new job, and then messaged me 10 minutes later saying he heard that our head of finance was leaving. So I was like, well, that's good news, because she sat opposite me and she's married to me. So there's even bigger questions here. So yeah, that's just a tip for anything. Just research it, please. Come on, guys, figure this out.
Yeah, well, yeah, that person would make it on my dickhead list. So I'm going to work on an AI filter to get rid of those people.
Absolutely.
If you can, because I've heard some incredible stories about some weird sort of, there's always weird things going on social media and weird points of interaction, especially when you're running a business. And yeah, I mean, good luck to that hustler who reached out to your wife, Ryan. And, yeah. Good luck to him. Maybe he's on this webinar.
Yeah, maybe.
What about here tonight, though?
Well, can you tell us a little bit about the story of Spitfire, like how that really came to be? I know you guys have the brand story on your website, but I'd just like to hear from you, sort of working so closely with Christy, and sort of like, how did Christy identify this problem of bringing such amazing sort of audio sounds into the world?
Yeah, so and it's important for me at this point to demarcate that I am less the special person at Spitfire when it comes to founders and these kind of the initial spark, idea, creator. I'm maybe part of the second win that comes in to support those people. I was an artist manager, before that. So maybe that's kind of the side of the fence that I sit on and work on. But yeah, like Nick said, Paul and Christian, who actually are very present on the internet, they've got big YouTube channels as well, and at the center of ours are these huge characters. And so the story, I'll give you a short version. They were 2 what I'd call jobbing media composers. And for those of you that don't know, the people that make the music to all the stuff we watch on TV, you may think it's this kind of glamorous lifestyle where you do a show for a couple of months and then you go on big holidays and you're there with your pen and paper, sat on a beach, kind of thinking what you're going to do for the next theme, for whichever TV show. No, it's a really hardcore job. It's back to back and sometimes simultaneous TV programs, all with big deadlines looming. So it really is a lot of composers who go out to their home studios, typically, sometimes commercial studios, and they are in that studio for 18 plus hours a day, churning out score. And so Paul and Christian were each doing that, and they were at that point in their lives where they had multiple projects at once. And they were also part of the wider composer community. And there was a message board, a place where the more geeky composers would hang out. And they both frequented that. They also were both opinionated and got kicked off of that board for separate issues, and became friends because, you know, they didn't have anyone to talk to now that they weren't on this board, this message board. And it was MySpace, I think. They messaged each other and said, "Oh, do you want to go for a pint?" They met up for a pint. They realized and discussed their process as composers and said, there's a real gap for just fantastic sounds. So of course they'd either write music on their computer, and back in those days it was more limited by the technology, or they'd go and record it in studios with orchestras. And they really lamented that if someone just got that recording right, if someone could go in and sample those instruments properly, and kind of make it available to the world or even to a select group, that it would be a game changer. And it was Christian who transpired to have done a TV ad that created all of a sudden a big royalty check, decided to go all in. And I think this is an important point that relates to the question. Is I think part of people that kind of getting somewhere is you've got to go all in at some point. I'm actually, like I said, I'm the second wind here. I waited until someone had gone all in and then joined the party. But Christian and Paul at that point, they went all in, and that was a huge commitment to do so. So they fronted the cash for these huge sessions, and they basically said, let's go and make samples like you record a movie score. So they went to Air Studios, which is where you go and record your big film scores, global. Lots of the Hollywood ones either happen at Air or Abbey Road. And they went and did a sample session there. And that was really the beginning of it. They had a consortium of high profile composers that shared these samples, and then they slowly turned those into commercial products. So it went from the two of them using these sounds to then 10 people. And now, like I said, we've got 1 million plus around the world. So yeah, there's just to think about your original question, Lucy. I think there are these kind of core ingredients, whether it's companies or artists or whatever the industry is, where it feels like you need that kind of spark of brilliance, you know, the thing at the very start, whether it's the idea or a talent. And then that needs, you can think of it as quite simple, which is you just got that person or that idea just has to happen and not disappear again. Yeah. So it's either like, if you're an artist, just commit in some way, whether it's a recording or, you know, getting some people to do something with you and take those steps outside of your bedroom or wherever you work. And then with a business, it's actually just to kind of do something with that idea, because obviously there's millions of ideas that people have, really good ones, and then they go, well, I can't do a business because other people out in the world do businesses and I'm just a person, you know, in a house. So why do I get to do that? But actually that's the mad thing is going through it. I'm sure we'll all agree. I mean, or maybe it's just me, but I continually have this revelation of meeting people that run, you know, big businesses or a big artist that I've heard of, and you realize, oh, you're just a person. You're just a person. Like I thought I was just a person, and am just a person. But that can be such an incredible barrier, I think, when you're just on your own and in a certain place, to the idea of kind of getting anywhere, where, you know, like I said, the best in the world, yeah, sure, there's special things about them and they got very special people around them, but you kind of realize they were just little boys like I was when I was younger, or little girls, and it's not a kind of exclusive world to go and play in. There's lots of complexities, of course, I accept that, but I do think that's a huge part of it. So yeah, I'll shush now.
No, that was brilliant, thank you. I think, yeah, it's fantastic to always hear the story of Spitfire, because I know it a little bit, but all of these stories, I think they seem to come from a spark of genius and passion, and really just being able to commit to an idea, but also you must really believe in it, and then you find a team of people that really believe in you and your idea, and I think that only comes from the intention and the passion as well. then anything's possible, really. And one thing that we have in this room, I think, in abundance is passion. And what I think we're really beginning to understand as well is like the real breadth of music technology. Like there's so many different intricacies to it. It's such a broad net, and it can mean so much in the space of innovation. And I'd like to sort of finish before we take it to the Q&As back to Prash, because as a music creator, I mean, you couldn't spend all day in your studio, and you're surrounded by how many pieces of technology right now. I mean, you've just had the Dolby Atmos installation go in as well. So I guess that's fundamental to your sort of daily creation and daily ability to make fantastic music sound even more fantastic. So as a sort of champion as well of Dolby Atmos, which is what I'd like to sort of finish on, tell me about, this is something that I'm only starting to hear about, and it seems to be a real buzzword, especially sort of in the sort of music industry at the moment. Why is this something that you felt really passionate about, as well as a creator, to sort of champion and to sort of have really to the point that you're the first studio at Tileyard to have this technology installed, and how do you think it's going to change the way we hear and listen to and consume music?
Well, it's I've always been fascinated by immersive audio. Like I mentioned before, my own album was a 9.1 surround Blu-ray. And I think there's so many ways, and people have always tried to experiment with multi-source audio for the last 50 years. There's been various experiments, and one of my main passions in stereo mixing and mastering is how to create a perception of a 3D sphere of sound from two speakers. That's always been a fascination of mine, and I've invested heavily in very strange valve gear and weird kind of esoteric rack units that make things feel like they're stretching out of the sound field. So the opportunity to just be able to move something into a different area was one I just couldn't miss, just on a pure nerd level. That's extremely satisfying for me. And just being able to create that sphere without having to use trickery, and just by moving things and having a room and an environment pulsate with a song and generate the same feeling but from all directions it's really something to behold when it's done correctly. It's awe-inspiring, as a technology. So just on a kind of listener's perspective, it can be phenomenal. I think currently it's at a very nascent form in terms of this adoption in binaural, but the difference now compared to other surround formats in the past is that we do have an actual real world, widespread, huge global technology delivery system through the AirPods, which has never existed before. So previously, surround sound immersive audio was reserved for the aged, slightly balding, bearded engineer like myself, who would be would have like a nice surround system at home, and they'd listen to records and then enjoy it, and then go online and be smug about their lives. But actually, that really doesn't extend to the mass market at all. Whereas now, with the advent of gaming, which is all immersive audio and head tracking, and now with the AirPods, which have head tracking and spatial audio built in, it just gives us an opportunity to actually share these things and show how great this stuff can really sound. Which is why it's become a buzzword, because Apple offering shelf space, the second biggest marketplace for audio delivery on the internet, if you're releasing a song. So and now they're getting huge market share in the States. So that being the case, they signed a contract with Universal. Well, Dolby signed a contract with Universal, and then Dolby signed a contract with Apple to provide the technology to them for their AirPods. Apple then decided to change that technology and create their own algorithm, which is helpful, which now is tailored for the AirPods. So it created another slight barrier to creation. So it's very hard to predict what the surround mixers are going to sound like, the spatial mixers. So I was mixing records, as I do every day, and heard about some of my records being mixed into Atmos. I thought, oh, that's fabulous. Let me go and have a listen. And they sounded terrible, quite honestly. They sounded shocking. And I thought, how can this be the case? This can't be right. And for one, it was I think, the industry had rushed to market with this technology. And now it's already 2-3 months after launch, it's already exponentially better than when it launched. But the challenge I found is that people were farming these mixes out to often people that weren't that aware of the artist's original intention and vision for the sonics of their record, which is why I decided, right, you know, it's really important for me as a trusted engineer of the artist I'm contracted by to make sure that every format of their release is correct. So that's why I invested in the setup for myself. But, you know, obviously that's led on to then being requested to do specific Atmos mixes as well for other artists. So now I'm on the other side. I'm like, oh God, I've really got to make sure the intention's right, because I've become that guy. So we just did the little hoodie mix for In Scope, went out last week. Travis Barker produced record with Serban mixes on the stereo. But then, for example, the new Caliuchis thing that came out last week for Amazon, I did the stereo, the master, and the Atmos mix all in my room, which is incredibly satisfying to be able to switch it a button and just hear these different perspectives of the audio. And there's some other ones that have new NE record on FAM, of course. And then, there's quite a few new ones about to land as well. So for me, I think it's going to become incredible when it comes to gaming audio. And I think as the algorithm increases in quality, the experience of the Little Hoodie record we just did, when I switched between the stereo and the Atmos, it's fantastic. It really is interesting. You can turn your head and literally focus on a particular sound. And I think as that technology increases, you know, one of the great things on a technical level, my dog's dreaming. He's having little barks. If you look on a purely technical level, where you've got sound normalization now as a part of every DSP, so that means they take the average perceived level of a song and match it to every other, so that when it plays on a playlist, your ears don't get blasted going from a classical record to a metal record, for example. So because now that's in place on every DSP near enough, what it means is in Dolby Atmos, I have basically infinite headroom. We still have to be fairly competitive in the stereo market. So it means that we have to have a level of loudness for when it goes to radio or it's played out a phone or anywhere else. You know, it needs to still be quite loud. But on Dolby Atmos, the level, it'll get rejected if it goes above -18. So that means I can turn everything down and just put loads of bass. I can put so much bass, and it just keeps going and going. It's fantastic. And then it level matches it to the original, and now my Atmos mix has way more low end, it's beefier, it's more open, and I can still match that extremely loud perceived energy different ways. But it's really exciting, and it's, you know, I feel like it's just fascinating being at the kind of forefront of trying to figure out workflows and methods of how to master this music, because there isn't a mastering suite yet. It doesn't exist. So we're all finding workarounds. There's like 3 or 4 engineers that I'm friends with that are doing this, and we're all like comparing notes and saying, right, okay, how come that sounds like crap, but that sounded amazing? Let's figure out what the algorithm's trying to do to the vocal on this song. And why does that one sound phenomenal? And, you know, it's just really exciting. I live for this stuff, and it's I mean, God, I love it. It's amazing. What's not to love?
I think you said something, Kelly. It gives you infinite headroom to create, which I just love that as a tagline. And though I didn't understand approximately half of that, I thought
Sorry.
it was amazing. No, I'm kidding. No, it was amazing. So much passion in what you're doing. It's so exciting that you're kind of at the forefront of it, and that you and your kind of friends who are also doing what you do are sort of figuring out and finessing this technology. Though you didn't create it, you are sort of mastering it, which is really, really exciting. So thank you, Prash. We've got about sort of 10 to 15 minutes left, so I will sort of flip over to the questions, but I'd like to just thank everyone for all of your incredible insight to this point. It's been amazing getting to hear a little bit more of your stories. And And Ryan has been incredibly efficient, answering like half of my cues. So thank you so much, Ryan.
There were a few directs, so I was like, I can answer those.
Wow, that was super slick. I've got one from Paul. May I get a copy of this webinar? Yes, you may, Paul. I shall be uploading it all afterwards, pending all the panelists approving. So that will be live, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks. This one's directed at Spitfire Audio. So does Spitfire think that they will market individual instrument articulation packages? Any answer on that, Will?
We're not thinking about it in any great detail right now, but I'd never say never.
Never say never. I like that. Leave space for illusion.
Well, it's the truth. I just never say never.
Never say never. Okay, I hope that answers your question. I've got one from John here. This will be, I think, directed at Prash. So as discussed, Dolby Atmos is becoming the next big thing. With regards to audio mixing and post-production, can you see any trends or technological advances with regards to the actual recording process?
Well, there are immersive microphones to pick up crowd and room sound from 7.4. They've got a kind of bass, but it's drawn from the other mic. That's definitely going to be the case. I mean, one of the things that I'm really looking forward to, I mean, there's a record soon we're going to be doing it with, which is kind of thinking of Dolby Atmos from the beginning of the writing process. And I don't think we've got to that point yet with a lot of the releases, obviously, because it's much more taking the stereo and reformatting it into an immersive audio format. But I think once we get into that, I think we'll really be in a good place. I think there is a gap in the market for better panning controllers. If anyone would like looking for a free idea there, to go make loads of good money from there, we need a proper 3D panning control for Dolby Atmos. Please develop me one. I'd love you forever. And I think also there's going to be there's just going to be far more. I think Kanye West, did something really interesting with Donda, where he released a separate stem pack. And I think there's going to be a lot more interesting use of constituent elements released in Atmos and how you can manipulate an existing piece of art to be a consistently regenerative piece of art. I think that's going to be a theme that we're going to see more and more, where songs will use AI to constantly change and move within space. I think that's going to be a new kind of thing, which I've seen bubbling up. But I think in terms of development of technology, the main thing is going to be improvements in the binaural algorithms. That's really, and Apple are doing it every day. Dolby have already done a fantastic job, to be honest. And the Sony 360 as well, which is catching up.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
3D
panel would be great. Thank you.
So if anyone knows how to make one of those, Prash's DMs are open. I've got a couple more questions which are kind of a bit more overarching, which I'll cover. I know Hazel, thank you for answering a load of questions as well. You guys have been fantastic, very efficient. Can see why you do what you do. So there's a question: has Tileyard got an overarching mentor or internal sort of scheme where a single young person could explore many of the Tileyard companies to understand how broad a career in creative industries can be, yet in the beginning, they don't have to fix on a single company? I guess this is probably one for you, Nick, in terms of if someone has an interest in knowing an access route into Tileyard and knowing about what's there, what would you recommend?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think that we try to have as many access points as possible to Tileyard. I mean, typically, the community is made up of people that are effectively renting space, whether it's a creative space, a specialist space, or a business space. But actually, we have other sort of entry points. We run our own education business, Tileyard Education, which Lucy knows all about because Lucy worked there for 3 years before joining me. But it's very much about giving people an opportunity to spend a year in the community whilst learning, but building contacts, working with on real life briefs, but also everyone that embarks on a course with us gets a mentor, at least one mentor, maybe and often more. I firmly believe in mentorship. I think it's absolutely crucial. You could argue that Paul, who owns Tileyard, effectively was a mentor to me for many years before we launched Tileyard. So I've seen the impact that's had on my life from when I met him, 15 odd years ago, to today. So it's something that I feel very, very passionate about. The other thing we do, we do a lot of outreach work as well. So we're constantly trying to plug into the local communities and give young people, often who have so much to say creatively, to give them an opportunity to become part of the industries we represent. So for me, and we're constantly looking at new ways of creating new touch points for people to participate in the industries we represent.
Thank you, Nick. I think that's a fantastic answer. I think, I think definitely to sort of elaborate on that, I'd say just go online, and there's plenty of content out there in terms of how you can sort of access our community, but also always feel free to directly reach out. We've got access points like our social media pages, and also info@Tileyard is a great route, and we'll always get back to you. There's quite a lot more questions. A lot of them have been answered, so I might pluck one more and then we'll sort of go into closing remarks. So that's quite a good one. How do you make substantial connections in the industry so you can find other innovators to connect with? I think that's great, because you've all alluded to the fact that you couldn't have done what you've done without a team. So how do you find the right people to collaborate with? Has anyone got any thoughts on that?
I could share that very quickly. I began doing music stuff, whether it's bands or doing work alongside that as part of playing in those bands or promoting, since I was about 13. So I'm 35 now. So if you consider that from about the age of 13, being a teenager, probably a couple of hours every day since then, I've been in some way in touch with, meeting new people, connecting with. I think time is a big thing, and something when people ask this specific question, I often tell them is just look at what's most immediately adjacent to you as your starting point. So it's very difficult to, if you live in, the middle of Wales, to go and have coffee with an A&R guy at Polydor, for example. Like that's probably a bit too ambitious, but there'll be someone very close to you that's working in some way close to music, whether it's, and it might be very, very indirect, but try and meet that person and just take the baby steps necessary to work, to develop a network that way. I think that's what's very tricky nowadays, I think, with the internet and socials. Again, I get asked this all the time, is I think there's the expectation that I can just DM someone and meet them and fast track what is actually, to build real relationships. It does take time. So I think that's something, is start close to home, and then you might be lucky. You might, and actually I was along the way. People did invite, I wasn't in London. People invited me up, and I did get a few breakthroughs where they go, all right, I'll entertain this weird kids for a moment and give them some time, and that changes everything. But that's just my tip that I tell people.
Yeah, I'll elaborate on that as well. I think that something that we champion at Tileyard is placemaking, and I think sort of putting yourself in spaces where you're going to meet other people on your wavelength is really important. So to elaborate on you there, Will, and I think you just alluded to London, and I agree, London was always traditionally the place where you would go to make those contacts in the UK, but soon that will also be Wakefield as well, won't it, Nick? As we open up the north, the new creative hub of the north, you'll have, I think it's really important that we sort of spread, I think, the creative industries amongst. Everyone doesn't feel like they necessarily have to be in London, but I think certainly creative hubs and being in spaces where people come together, it just like drastically increases your chances, and I can echo that, because that is how I got to know Nick and his wonderful team. Well, I think that draws us to probably a close for today's webinar. I've had some great questions, had some great conversation, and I'd like to thank all of you in the room for everything that you've sort of shared with us today. Some great anecdotes in there. yeah, you've all been fantastic, and I'm so excited to also see what's going to come out of some of the stuff that you guys are working on over the next sort of 12 months, 5 years, 10 years. Anything you'd like to add, Nick?
Oh, no, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. I want to say thanks to you, Lucy. I think you've been fantastic. So thank you so much for hosting this. It's just, I love it. I never tire of hearing amazing stories told by great people. And and thanks to the guys. So thanks to all of you for coming on board and sort of representing the Tileyard massive, as we say. And long may it continue. But no, it's really humbling. And I think these things, you often think, God, an hour. It goes so fast. I could easily just keep listening for another couple of hours. So that was really enjoyable. So thanks, guys.
Thanks, Nick. Tileyard massive. You make it sound like we're in a gang.
Jungle rave.
Well, no, we got to go to the studio for that, Prash.
Got you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your time today, and thank you for all of the attendees for popping in and having a listen. And I'll be following up with emails to everyone with how you can find out more information about all of the companies. But yeah, you've all been incredible. So thanks for giving us your time today, and thanks to Leeds Digifest for having us as well. So thanks so much, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Big time. Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.
See you.